Everybody's asking who is going to be this year's Ivan Pace. This year's Najee Thompson. Well, I brought in Mr. Small School Kevin Fielder to talk about some undrafted free agents.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who listen to this show every single day. My hashtag everydayers. I appreciate you all so very much. You make this thing go. And you make it possible for me to do things like what I've been doing this week in the next couple weeks, which is going into a little bit of a slowdown mode, just doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday instead of all of the weekdays, which we'll be doing for up until May 20th. That week, we're back to normal. So thank you so much for hanging out. If you're new here, that's the deal. That's what's going on right now. And you're just looking for some undrafted free agent stuff. Hello, welcome. My name is Luke. You can find this show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, as well any podcast listening app, as well as YouTube and Amazon Fire and Roku, if you just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Indulge your competitive side. The mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly is here and free on the App Store or Google Play. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free. So we talked for a long time, so I'll get right into it. But basically, this is a bit of an undrafted free agent review, talking about some of the smaller school guys. We got two guys from Mercer, Florida International, Air Force, guys that aren't exactly going to get a lot of fanfare, but are still definitely worth previewing in terms of their odds to maybe sneak onto this roster. Certainly isn't far-fetched. We had 3 undrafted rookies make the roster last year, and one of them turned into a bona fide starter. So definitely worth the time to go check it out. And for that, I brought in the cavalry, which is Kevin Fielder. This is what he does. Small school, really cool stuff. Talking to him. So let's get right into it. All right, let's dive into the path less traveled with Kevin Fielder of Rivals. I have been encouraging Kevin here to indulge in his worst instincts, which is diving deep into the small school of the draft, the Southland Conference kind of guys. I love it. It's your niche. I love that about you. Hello, Kevin, and thank you for hanging out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm the only one who's watched Marshall film over the last 3 days, willingly done it as well. willingly sat down and went.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some like Vikings analysts that wanted to watch every undrafted guy or whatever. And you found it was an off-ball linebacker, right? That was Marshall.
Owen Porter, edge rusher.
Owen Porter.
Yeah, he's a player.
he exists. So we were talking before we did this, and I guess let's just say what the mission is here. We're trying to find the Ivan Pace of this class. We're trying to find, or maybe more broadly, we're trying to find undrafted free agents who make the team. And look, I'm not going to sit down and say also like, let's watch like the Oklahoma guys. Like I can do that. But for the small school stuff, you're the guy to go to. That's the way that I have come to know you is as the small school guy.
Yeah. I think that, I started covering FAU. Like that's where I got my start into, I guess, big time college football, and big time very loosely in air quotes, because FAU is not big time football. It is college
but
football.
FAU basketball was, FAU and you were a part of that.
That was cool as heck. But FAU college football, right? It's like, it's smaller. It's, a lot of these guys aren't making the NFL. And if they are, they're making practice squads or they're sneaking in on 53-man rosters. And so I've sort of used that experience covering those teams and watching those guys play to, I guess, sort of turn this into, as you sort of mentioned, the niche, the weird thing that like, I'm the only guy watching, these schools in the middle of March going, oh man, this edge rusher from William and Mary looks like he could be an NFL player.
I mean, you and teams though, right? Like,
I think it's teams as well.
It's
because
valid.
These guys are getting signed. These guys are getting signed, right? Like I tweeted about a guy who ended up getting an undrafted free agent contract, and so like teams are at least watching these guys. And I'm not the the only weird guy in the world who cares enough about William and Mary football in
Yeah.
2024 middle of March. So
yeah, well, it's not interesting to media, but it does affect the league, and I think that is probably where our brain should take us a little bit more than like what's interesting to a football website. But it's almost perfectly exemplified in the Project X article about Levi Drake Richardson, the Vikings 7th-round D tackle out of Texas A&M Commerce, who was Project X. So the big athletic article about scouts showing up to I think it wasn't the A&M Pro Day, but it was like some regional pro day that like many schools were a part of, specifically to watch him, and getting super pissed off that like 12 other teams sent people to watch him. Like he had been way more discovered than we thought. So I don't know, you and people with the actual jobs, I feel like you're on a good track, but
hopefully.
yeah. So let's talk about Levi Drake Richardson. I would love to hear, because you managed to get your hands on a little bit of tape of him. So what do you think?
Yeah, so the thing that I give myself credit for, right, is like I did not watch him before he was drafted by the Minnesota Vikings. So I came in with a fully clean slate. And so I gave him,
and you're not a Vikings fan. I should mention, like, there's no
yes,
homer. You're a Dolphins fan. You do not care.
I am not a Vikings fan by trade, right? So I am not
Yeah.
like in a rooting interest of like I need this guy to be good because he's on my favorite team, right?
Like that's a bias that I have to like actively combat.
Like
that you don't have to. So
I obviously root for these guys because I think the story is really cool, right? To be the guy for a small regional school that no one has ever heard about to go make an NFL roster, I think it's the coolest thing ever, right? Like that's the thing I live for. So I came in and I watched a few games, and then I watched his Tropical Bowl film, which is the post-season All-Star Draft showcase that he was a part of. And
right,
it's weird,
like
because
the D1 AA version of the
yeah,
Bowl, kind of.
I think they had a couple swing tackles from like Power 5 schools that I don't think ever made an NFL,
like a smaller version.
Yeah, so I came in and I watched it, and it's a tale of two tapes really for me, right? Because the college film, he feels a little bit more explosive. He feels like he's just playing out of position, which is not uncommon for these schools to put a guy at the wrong spot, right? And he's playing more.
We'll be specific. He's playing at sort of a 3 tech, sort of like a two eye kind of deal.
He's playing like 2 eye, 1 tech. He's playing some like true nose tackle 0 tech, and like
okay, so he's playing more inside, because I do think that's where the Vikings want him, and that because he says he's gained like 20 pounds since college.
Yeah, and so that's the thing, right? Is like I think he was just playing undersized in college, and I think that part of that is, first of all, Texas A&M Commerce does not have very good training facilities comparatively, and I've spoken to players at the FCS level who tell me my high school had better facilities than the FCS program that I went to, right? And like that's not uncommon to hear. So I don't know where he went to high school. I don't know what the build is there, and like do they have 3 indoor practice facilities, because that's what some schools do. But I just think it was a thing if he didn't have the weight training to go up to that weight that he wanted to be at. And it sort of impacted his tape in college, because you're watching him get pushed off the ball a lot, pushed at the point of attack a lot, and he just looks really weak. And then you watch the Tropical Bowl film, and he looks like a different football player. He looks like a different animal. And the level of competition is slightly higher in the Tropical Bowl comparatively to
all stars.
Yeah, I mean, these guys
all stars, but of that level. Yeah,
these guys are at least on NFL radars. Are they ever going to get picked up? Probably not. Maybe not. But they're at least on a radar. And so,
like a rookie mini camp level of competition.
Yeah, and so like he's dominating these guys. He's pushing offensive linemen back. He's quick off the ball. He looks like a different player. So I think that what I'm imagining is that Minnesota saw the Tropical Bowl film, saw the explosiveness playing at, I think he was about 290, 300 in college, and put those two things together and saw at least a mold of a football player who can contribute. I don't think he's a day one contributor, but he's a guy who could make the 53-man roster because they love what he can be, or the practice squad because they love what he can be. And I see flashes. I just think the biggest thing is he needs to find a way to put it all together and build up the play strength to make it something where he is a viable option against NFL offensive guards, because he was not always a viable option against FCS level guards.
So that's going to be the thing about it. And there's two things, I guess, to mention. One is when an athlete greatly changes their body profile, that will have an effect on their athleticism. And sometimes their athleticism never returns to what it was before. I think James Lynch is a great example of that, where his weight was up and down and he was kind of never the same guy. And then also, so this guy goes at 232, pick 232. He's their last pick in the draft. And in the 6th round, the Vikings took a kicker. To me, that basically screams not undraftable grades all over the board now. That's like we ran out of guys. We took a kicker.
I think
so. And the 7th round is very often for like priority free agents that you anticipate will have a really big market, and you use your draft pick on that, because if there are 12 guys at his scouting him, he might have a lot of phone calls. Hey, let's just not negotiate. You're just ours now. And we don't have anybody draftable on the board anyway, so we might as well start getting ahead on priority free agents.
Yeah, the biggest thing I think is that they drafted him late in the 7th round because they just liked enough of the film to protect themselves against a bidding war. Because would you rather have to shell out the contract that a 7th round pick is, or have to go through and bid against potentially 15 other NFL teams that like enough of the talent? And so for a guy like Levi Drake Rodriguez, right? Like, you're just betting on upside, and you're basically guaranteeing your spot at the table for him, right? You're guaranteeing that you're the one who gets to develop him, and not the Arizona Cardinals per se, or whatever other team.
Assuming you roster him, but then you get are you going to cut him and then he just gets picked up on someone else's? You go to someone else's 53. So there's a lot of stuff about that. But I do want to make sure we have enough time to get to, because we have quite a few undrafted free agents that we want to talk about here. So I do want to make sure there is enough time for that. That'll come up next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. It's the best place to go and gamble on something like, say, a playoff series with your favorite basketball team in the 2nd round for the first time since 2004. Or anything else. Of course, maybe you can gamble on the Twins getting their 11th win in a row or something like that. Whatever it is, you can check it out at FanDuel.com. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 to bet on the spreads, money lines, player props, home run props, slam dunks, whatever, you name it. Find it at FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, moving right along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for listening. When you're done here, go check out the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube page. There's a 24/7 live stream there, all things Minnesota sports. I think this is going to be up on Friday the 3rd. So I think the Timberwolves will be underway by then. So you can listen to Locked On Wolves there, all that other stuff. So go check that out if you want more Minnesota sports talk. Still hanging out here with Kevin Fielder. We're going to talk about some small school undrafted free agents looking for the guys that make the team. And I think I just want to get right to the guy that I think you're the most like hyped on compared to how hyped everybody else is. Cause it'd be really easy to just say like, Gabriel Murphy or McGlothern, the Arkansas corner, like the guys that everybody thought were draftable that then fell out of the draft. But let's put those guys aside for a little bit. I talked about those guys a little bit earlier in the week. Talk to me about these Mercer receivers. I know you've got takes.
Man, so I went in watching Ty James because Ty James was the FCS All-American that I thought would be.
He was the 1,000-yard, the main receiver at Mercer. And then there's this other guy.
Yeah, so the other guy is Devron Harper. And
yeah,
I'm watching Ty James, and I see this little guy. He's like 5'9", barely, right? And I'm like, oh, okay. This guy's kind of good. And I knew they signed 2 Mercer wide receivers. And then he takes a jet sweep and he makes 4 guys miss. And I go, you have my attention. That's
awesome.
that's the attention grabbing play that you need to make if you're a UDFA, right? And so he makes that play once and I go, okay, I'm intrigued. Then he does it again. And I go, I'm no longer just intrigued. I am fully bought in. Because
here's I'll put the screws to you with this question. Does it look like he's in the wrong division?
Yes, right. Like I think that he
Okay.
is
I know he's
I think
small,
he
but
is.
like you can
I
live.
I have seen smaller FBS players succeed. So I don't think the height would be the issue why he wouldn't be at the FBS level. I just think he was a late bloomer. I know he transferred from
Hmm.
Gardner Webb, and I know that this year was, I think, his most productive year on paper. And the tape showed they used him in a lot of different ways. Devron Harper, they used him on jet sweeps, they used him on deep throws. Like he was all used all over the place. So I think he's like in the NFL, he's a tweener. I don't know if he's a halfback, if he's a running back, if he's a slot wide receiver, if you play him on the outside. I don't know. I feel like he's a guy that you pick up first and then you figure out the role for later
Hmm.
because his pathway to making the Vikings is through special teams. He's a great returner. He was an FCS All-American at returner. He's returned kickoffs for touchdowns. So that's his pathway there. And then on the topic of Ty James, right? Like, I don't want to bury him as like he's not as good as Devron Harper because he was the 1,000-yard receiver and the
It's so
FCS All
different
American.
too. Like
Like
yeah,
he,
like being the gadget guy and being the like the all like the guy that hey our offense runs through you, and then we've got you for gadgets. Like the gadget guy go boom and that's fun, but ultimately you can't make the whole plane out of it.
yeah. So I think Ty James is like the actual wide receiver of the team, right? Like he's the grown up of the group, and he's big. He's like 6'2". He's 200 pounds. He runs really well for his size. I project him as like a deep threat receiver because I think that he works through press as well. He didn't have to play a lot of them in college because Mercer's offense is like the typical college football Mickey Mouse offense where they find ways to get every team out of press defense very quickly. But when he did have to work through contact, he worked through it well. And, we'll see if that carries over to NFL competition because FCS cornerbacks are not NFL cornerbacks. But I think there are some encouraging things. And I know that he's the one that I think a lot of NFL teams wanted because I think he was the one that on draft night, on the end of day 3, he was picked up by 3 different teams before it was eventually the Vikings who got their hands on him and got I guess, the first chance to see who he is, in
Yeah.
training camp.
So I guess I can tease this because the interview's in the can. It's going up. So I got to actually speak with Devron Harper. That's going to be an episode that comes out in a couple weeks on Locked On Vikings. One of the pre-recorded ones as I go out of town. And he told me one that he's going to try really hard to put on some extra bulk.
He needs to.
Yeah, because it's like he's at like death wish weight right now. And 2, another really interesting thing. You'll all have to listen to the interview, the wording yourself, because it was a little bit unclear to me, like ambiguously worded to me, but it kind of sounded like Devron Harper got called by the Vikings, and then Ty James found out about that, and he was choosing between Minnesota and Baltimore, and chose Minnesota so he could be with his friend and roommate. And those two are like really, really, really close. So there might be some real cutesy stuff going on. I'll leave it at that. I like didn't quite, and then I like didn't follow up. So it kind of is just left open, but maybe, right? But I do want to get to the other guy. I think the other guy that you have as maybe the best shot to make the actual roster, mostly because of his path to the roster. Like with Devron Harper, he's got to like beat Brandon Powell for a returner job probably.
He's got to be good
and
players.
And yeah, like he's probably got to win that. And we know how much Kevin O'Connell loves Brandon Powell. So that's an uphill battle. Plus, working your way into the receiver roster and knocking off somebody like Jalen Naylor or something there's a path, but it's harder. At linebacker, at off-ball linebacker, that is wide open. There's pace. There's Blake Cashman, and nobody else is, I think, free from the possibility of getting cut if one of these undrafted guys shows out. So I think you've pointed out at least special teams, Dallas Gant, he's the Toledo one, right? Dallas Gant as the guy that has sort of the wide open path in front of him.
Yeah, when I looked at his stats and I looked at his snap counts, the first thing that stood out is he played special teams a lot in college. He has, I think, upwards of about 800 special team snaps throughout his college career. And
yeah, like maybe he's Matt Daniels is like, bring me that guy.
That's very similar to what Najee Thompson was last year, right? And Najee Thompson was the elite All-American special team punt gunner that I guarantee you was Matt Daniels. I need this guy on the roster. He's going to make the roster kind of pick or bang the table for a pick in terms of undrafted free agents. And it wouldn't shock me if Dallas Gant was similar because he's sort of twitchy, he's athletic, he's very good in pursuit. He's got a lot of the traits watching the film that you want out of a special teamer, and he has the experience on special teams. And so, while I don't know if he's a very good defensive player in the NFL because he's super light, I think that he makes the roster, or can make the roster, I should say, as a special teamer because, first of all, they need depth at linebacker. They probably need another special teamer as well. And if you're looking to fill two holes with one position, I mean, backup, fourth string, third string probably fourth string off ball linebacker makes a lot of sense for, that role to be a special teamer who ideally never plays defense or very uh, sparingly plays defense.
Yeah, it would be a Troy Dye sized role. Very different guy. Troy Dye was huge, but like a different, like the Troy Dye level of participation, where maybe you do rotate in a little bit, because all four of the Vikings off ball linebackers got actual snaps last year. There was no special teams, just like only guy. And on a 53-man roster, you don't have room, I think, to do that twice unless those guys are really, unless you're talking Eric Frampton and Heath Farwell. Like, otherwise, it's really hard to get away with that. That's a deep cut.
I don't know who either of those people are. We're going to be honest.
Okay. If you want to watch some special teams tape, go find, it was 2000s Vikings, Brad Childress era. Those two dudes, and Heath Farwell is now a special teams coordinator in Pittsburgh, I think. Or maybe Seattle.
That's why the
something.
He's
he's coaching. He's an NFL special teams coordinator now. Those two guys, I've never seen anything like it. They made the tackle every single time. It did not matter where the play went. It was one of those two guys every single time. Never seen anything like it. We'll never see anything like it again. Love those guys.
That sounds amazing.
Like, unless you have, and they never played from scrimmage, but unless you have like that level of guy, it's really hard to get to. So it kind of feels like, to be the special teams, the guy that made the roster on special teams and nothing else, you have to beat out Najee Thompson for that.
Yeah, and I don't know if any of these guys are doing that. Like, I'm going to be brutally honest. I think he is your best special teamer on roster.
Like, you need to do it from scrimmage then. And hey, look, like the Vikings are pretty open to the idea of undersized linebackers. That describes all the rest of them too. Blake Cashman's fine. But Pace, Asamoah, like smaller guys, right? Kamu, I think, is also smaller, if I'm not mistaken.
He's kind of smaller, and he's a guy who Brian Flores has used a lot, so it doesn't shock me that he's
and that's a Flores guy, so you got to knock that off as well. It's kind of the same things like Powell with O'Connell. But okay, so there's one, but you have, I think, a couple of other like kind of like little crushes that you've developed through this project that I want to make sure that we get time to talk about. So that'll come up next. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go, the hit twist on classic Monopoly. We all remember and love what we could do to our loved ones, the cruelties we could get away with in Monopoly. But hey, you can also team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more prizes you unlock, such as unique stickers, cool pieces, all the cosmetics that you grow to love in a game like this. Plus, Monopoly Go is new and exciting with constantly changing tournaments and challenges, so check back into the game all the time. There's always new timed events that help you win big, but get on them. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, moving right in here, still hanging out with Kevin Fielder here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. So give me the guy that you think has the best chance to make the roster from scratch. And I know we've pre-talked about, I know what the answer is, but like from scrimmage, like no special teams. We've got the Air Force linebacker. We've got FIU. What are we talking about here?
For me, it's FIU linebacker Donovan Manuel. And I've been told that the 2022 film is not as good. I went back and watched it, and it is not as good as the 2023 film. I'm willing to throw that away because the 2023 film, he's playing against Power 5 competition. He's playing against Arkansas, and Arkansas is not great Power 5, but they're still Power 5. Those are still high-level athletes, and he is dominating. He's all over the field. He runs like a chicken with its head cut off. He's all over the field trying to make a play. And that will carry over. Coaches take notice of the guy who's willing to run around and try and chase down KJ Jefferson, the quarterback, who's built like a Mack truck, to try and make the tackle. And, he's not perfect. He's kind of a little bit on the slower side. He's a lot like Denzel Perriman, who, he's not going to be the fastest, but he's sort of intelligent. He knows how to use the speed and the explosiveness that he has, and he's super powerful. He's not afraid to, to some degree, put an offensive lineman on their behind and try and make a play. So, like, I think that from that sense, he fits a Brian Flores type of linebacker, with the blitzing and trying to get pressure on the quarterback. He screams like someone who could do that from the A gap and sort of disrupt an offensive guard in the NFL as much as he did against college offensive linemen. And there were some NFL talents there like Bo Limmer, who was drafted, that he played against and played well against. So like I think that there are ways that he can make the roster. It may just again, he may just have to find a way to build a role in special teams, but from a defensive standpoint, from scrimmage, I think he's ready for NFL sort of play.
I wonder, like with Flores in particular, I think what we learned last year was everybody gets in, and if you can't get in, you ain't making the team. And unless it's like a specific Najee Thompson kind of thing,
Yeah.
but like we said, there's only really room for one of those guys. So everybody has to, like, you got to get in, you got to do something. You got to have something that's your thing. So is it that it's blitzing is his thing, or is there a little bit? Because like if you can't be so specialized that you're a tell. That when you come on the field, it's like we know what's about to happen here. Like you still have to be able to do some of that. So is there that versatility to him, or is this like a blitz specialist? You're putting him in on like kind of third downs only. Like
I think that there are, right. Like I don't know. I think the speed will be the big tell. Can he play at the NFL sort of speed? Because the NFL game is faster than the college game. But he can play simplified zones. He can probably guard some of the slower tight ends in the league. I don't think they're going to ask him to go cover the Travis Kelce's of the world. I think they've got guys to try.
It's kind of not up to them. If he's on the field, then the offense.
If he's on the field and that's the situation, then what you have to do it. But like ideally, I don't think that they're going to be tasking him or any of these undrafted guys, frankly, to be doing that. But I think that there is a way that he could be a 2-down player. I don't think he's ever a 3-down linebacker in the NFL, but I think he's a 2-down linebacker. And to some degree, I think that still matters. And I think that he could probably start off in a specialized role, not so much specialized that he is the tell, as you mentioned, but I think that he could start as a specialized player and then through development, through sort of staying on the roster and learning what it's like to play in the NFL. I think he could be a little bit more, but I loved the way that he played against the run. And so I'm encouraged to see how that carries over, because he was flowing. He was, breaking down blocks. He was doing all the things that you're supposed to do as an off-ball linebacker. And he was doing it at a pretty high level against some solid competition.
Lastly, the last guy I wanted to talk to you about, I need you to talk me off the ledge here, because we got another freaking military edge rusher that's like too small. And like, I'm so burned on this with Andre Carter, who did make the team as an undrafted free agent. Probably more of like a we're scared of his market thing, though, because when he did get on the field, it was dreadful. I mean, it was embarrassing. So what are we just doing this again? Or is this just another guy that like we bring him in an undrafted free agency? He isn't in football shape at all. He like just needs a year in the weight room. And should we just kind of all like close our eyes and say like Bo Richter doesn't exist for a year and then just like circle on this back after a year on the practice squad? Or is there more to this guy than there? Like, stop me from just making this comparison.
Yeah, I made the comparison too, because I watched the film and I go, oh, wow, he's really little. And it was concerning because I'm sorry, I can't do it. I won't do it. Right. Like I don't see NFL level defender. I see NFL level special teamer. But as you mentioned, he's not making the roster just because he can play special teams. They can go find a guy who can play special teams and also play defense.
Like there's a world for that, but you got Najee Thompson in your way.
Yeah, like I don't know if they're not rostering 2 guys who are just special teams aces. And unless he comes in and he blocks 3 punts in the preseason, like I don't see a pathway for him to make the active roster. I think there's special teams upside because he has a high motor. He is not completely irrelevant as a edge rusher in college. I don't think he can play edge rusher in the NFL because I'm sure you're going to talk about Gabriel Murphy and the fact that he's undersized and doesn't have the longest arms. Bill Richter is very similar. That he's small, does not have the longest arms, probably will not work as an NFL edge rusher. So he has to play off ball linebacker. And I don't see a way that he's able to make the roster as an off ball linebacker. When you mention guys like Dallas Gant, who has the upside of being an Ohio State recruit, Donovan Manuel, who I think is a NFL. I gave him a draftable grade. When I went back and regraded him on my scale, I gave him a 7th round grade. So I thought he was a draftable football player on defense. And so I don't see him being as good as either of those guys. So I think that like right now, either he has to make the team as the special teamer or he is on the practice squad this year.
So he's got to change his body and change his position, but otherwise he's like, it's when I start to not get it. It's like, why don't you just get a real off-ball linebacker then? Like, why are you taking like this guy? What do you like about him? You're changing everything about him, you know?
They did it last year too, right? They went out and they added a couple special teamers only with Najee Thompson, and I think last year it sort of made sense because they were looking for that special teamer. But you found a guy who can be that special teamer, so that was the head scratching. I guess
competition's good, but yeah. That makes sense. Kevin, plug your stuff. Plug your draft guide. I don't care that it's not done. Do it. Say it. Say the project. It's cool.
Yeah. So, as we sort of talked about, I'm, I guess, Mr. Small School. I'm the guy who cares enough about these guys to follow them and track them and watch them and, follow them throughout college. So, starting this year, I am starting a small school draft guide. No Power 5 schools, only FCS. Some Division II guys, some Group of 5 guys, the guys who are NFL players, the guys who I think can be NFL players or can at least get a shot. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see how many of those guys get shots comparatively, because I know everyone likes to do the 75% of my top 100 got drafted in the top 100. I'm really interested to see how many of my guys on the small school list get undrafted free agent spots or get drafted. And so that's going to come out probably sometime in April, right? I mean, we're still so early in the process for 2025, but it's just sort of be on the lookout for that. And then the best place is to follow me on Twitter / I guess X now, at Rivals Fielder, FIELDER. I can't believe I said X. That hurts me inside, but
it gives me the excuse to do what I've been waiting the whole show to do, which is to say, shut up, Kevin.
That's fair.
And thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, everybody. Thanks again for hanging out. This is the last one that I'm here for that won't be pre-recorded. So, look, if I miss anything while I'm gone, there could be like a Justin Jefferson extension, and then I'm going to upload like a super random interview with somebody. I apologize for that in advance, and I will circle back to whatever I miss when I get back into the country. So I will see you all for that. And as always, Skull.